Officer Heredia Rubio claims that he handcuffed the auditors and detained them in the back of his vehicle for 30 minutes simply because he, quote, wanted to. As we will discuss later in this episode, it is clear that Officer Heredia Rubio did not have the reasonable suspicion necessary to legally detain the auditors on the street, let alone in handcuffs in the back of a police cruiser. However, even if he did have reasonable suspicion to detain them, a court would likely conclude that Officer Heredia Rubio violated the Fourth Amendment by handcuffing the auditors and ordering them to sit in the backseat of the cruiser for 30 minutes. While the use of handcuffs or placing someone in the back of a police cruiser does not automatically transform a Terry stop detention, which only requires reasonable suspicion of a crime, into an arrest that requires probable cause, courts have consistently held that when a detention is sufficiently intrusive, it can become a so-called de facto arrest, even if the officer did not intend to arrest the individual or officially place them under arrest. In the 2007 case of U.S. versus Williams, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Florida, explained that, quote, to determine whether a stop became an arrest, we apply 4 non-exclusive factors: the law enforcement purposes served by the detention, the diligence with which the police pursued the investigation, the scope and intrusiveness of the detention, and the duration of the detention. Likewise, in the 2004 case of U.S. versus Acosta, the 11th Circuit determined that, quote, under the third factor, we ask whether the scope and intrusiveness of the detention exceeded the amount reasonably needed by police to ensure their personal safety. Because, quote, officers may take reasonable steps to ensure their safety so long as they possess an articulable and objectively reasonable belief that the suspect is potentially dangerous. Similarly, in the 1992 case of Reynolds versus State, the Supreme Court of Florida held that, quote, police may properly handcuff a person whom they are temporarily detaining when circumstances reasonably justify the use of such restraint. Whether such action is appropriate depends on whether it is a reasonable response to the demands of the situation. Relying on this decision, the 4th District Court of Appeal of Florida determined in the 2016 case of Quasi versus State that the use of handcuffs during a Terry stop was illegal when, quote, the defendant gave the officer no reason to suspect he would flee and no reason to suspect he was armed or dangerous. In this situation, even if reasonable suspicion to detain the auditors existed, nothing the auditors did gave any indication that they intended to harm Officer Heredia Rubio or that they intended to flee. And Officer Heredia Rubio even admitted that he handcuffed the auditors and forced them in the cruiser because he wanted to, not because he had any concerns about his safety or